The nation was put on alert last night, saying the president was going to address the nation at 6 o'clock. So we waited to 6:05, and then 6:10, and then 6:15, and then 6:20, and I think about 6:25 or thereabouts, he finally showed up to make an announcement that a man was leaving the IRS 2 weeks early. And that was the substance of that announcement that we waited so long for. But the White House is now going into full damage control after being hit by a perfect storm of scandals.
Now the president is taking action after the IRS targeted conservative groups. But he's facing an uphill battle. Ephraim Graham has the story.
President Obama's second-term agenda is quickly being overshadowed by a steady stream of congressional investigations, from Benghazi to the IRS targeting conservative groups to the Justice Department seizing of Associated Press phone records. The president is working to get out ahead of the scandals bearing down on the White House. He spoke to the nation Wednesday, taking the IRS scandal head-on by announcing the acting commissioner would resign.
I will not tolerate this kind of behavior in any agency, but especially in the IRS, given the power that it has and the reach that it has in all of our lives.
The president's announcement comes after days of being hammered by outraged Republicans.
My question is, who's going to jail?
Attorney General Eric Holder told Congress the scandal is being investigated.
The FBI is coordinating with the Justice Department to see if any laws were broken. I think, as everyone can agree, if not criminal, they were certainly outrageous and unacceptable.
Even Democrats are criticizing the president, accusing him of being too passive and not responding quickly enough to the scandals. The White House insists President Obama had no prior knowledge of the IRS scandal, but there's a long history of presidential abuses involving this agency. Political analyst James Bovard wrote in the Wall Street Journal that the IRS has been often used for political purposes in administrations from Franklin Roosevelt to John F. Kennedy to Richard Nixon. Former IRS Commissioner Stephen Miller appears before a congressional committee Friday. Just the beginning of a long string that could easily lead to a long, hot summer in Washington for the administration. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
It seems like this is a whole rotten group. I mean, they first started to say, well, it was just a few rogues in Cincinnati. Nonsense. The people in Cincinnati said, we got orders from up in Washington. It went to the general counsel's office. It's all the way through the IRS that they should target conservatives. And anybody that says we want to make America a better place, by saying you want to make it a better place, that's a criticism of the president. And so their shows should be targeted. It's shocking. And American Center for Law and Justice, I might add, Jay Sekulow, is going to sue the IRS and send a demand letter. We've got a number of people waiting to have their applications approved. If you don't approve them by Friday, we're going to court. So others are, and John Boehner said the question is not who's going to resign, but who's going to jail. Well, the White House is also trying to control the damage from that Benghazi attack. But that damage control may not be working. Lee Webb has that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's Lee.
That's right, Pat. The administration released 94 pages of emails and notes about the Benghazi attack, but Republicans say that's not enough. Some are asking why all of the unclassified documents have not been released. Those emails show that the White House and State Department worked to change the talking points on Benghazi. No surprise there. The State Department tried to avoid references to al-Qaeda and security concerns at Benghazi. Conservatives have repeatedly criticized, though, the administration for blaming the attack at first on a YouTube video against Islam rather than on terrorism. The growing scandal surrounding Benghazi, the IRS, and the AP could spell another problem for the president. It could mean the end to what some have called a cozy relationship with the mainstream media. David Brody has that story now from Washington.
As the scandals pile up, the mainstream media is slowly turning on the Obama administration, whether it be the IRS targeting conservative groups
You have to understand and hear how it sounds like the administration might be hiding something.
Or the Justice Department secretly seizing phone records of Associated Press reporters.
It's chilling. I guess they owe us an explanation.
Even his biggest supporters are heading for the door. This is MSNBC commentator Chris Matthews a year ago on President Obama.
Everything he's done is clean as a whistle. He's never not only broken any law, he's never done anything wrong. He's the perfect father, the perfect husband, the perfect American.
Fast forward to the present.
He doesn't want to know about them. He doesn't want to run the United States government. And that has been the problem. Why isn't he angry, really angry, about what happened with the IRS?
If you're the president, this is not a good sign. Now, the media is also coming around on what happened in Benghazi after the death of American ambassador to Libya, Chris Stevens. Only CBS reporter Sharyl Attkisson pursued this from the beginning, long before her mainstream colleagues. She sat down exclusively with CBN News.
The media is not always consistent in the vigor that they use to pursue a given topic. And I do think the media did not use the opportunity in the weeks and months after Benghazi to be as persistent and as pointed as they should have, considering the importance of the issue, in my view.
Attkisson says she's definitely received pushback from the White House.
The White House called about an article I wrote a week or so ago. They personally pushed me back. You know, I'm used to that, so that's their job. Sometimes the harder they push, the more I believe maybe we're mining fertile area.
Attkisson has been applauded by conservative groups for her tenacious reporting. She says CBS executives supported her coverage despite having a tough time getting her Benghazi stories on television.
Every story that you present as a reporter has to be bought by a broadcast, meaning not purchased for money, but you have to get them interested in it. So maybe Evening News wants one story, Morning News wants a story. And there hasn't been an appetite for the stories I've offered on Benghazi.
The perfect storm of Benghazi, the IRS, and the AP phone log story leads to an even larger question.
You think there's a disappointment to a certain degree within liberal camps?
I think there's a huge disappointment.
Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank recently wrote that, quote, 100 days into his second term, Obama has already lost control of the agenda, if he ever had control in the first place. Milbank tells CBN News that Obama's lifeless, submissive attitude has hurt him.
It struck me that it was just very oddly passive for this president who had just won a second term to be sort of resigning himself to that and saying, I'll just see what they do up there. You know, there's only so much I can do. I'm going to wash my hands of the whole thing. It was odd for him not to be, I think, out there fighting more for his agenda.
Now it seems like the only fighting this president is doing is fighting off scandal after scandal. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Yeah, one thing the president probably will not be doing in the next few days, Pat, is reaching for his golf clubs.
I wouldn't count on it. Maybe he'll reach for the basketball. He seems to enjoy playing some hoops with his buddies, so we'll see what it is. He needs the exercise. But it is, Lee, it's incredible. He says to these people, well, I learned about that on the news the way you did. Nonsense. He's got briefing from the highest intelligence agencies in our nation who are feeding him information 24/7. He should be on top of all these things. These are some pretty serious matters. And he's disengaged. I think that's his style. He just, frankly, he doesn't know what he's doing because he has no training in it. He's never run a corporation, never run an enterprise. He was a community organizer in Chicago before he was elected to public office. And he's never done these things, so he's uncomfortable. And he just sort of says, well, we'll just kind of let things work its way out. He thinks he's very eloquent. He says, quote, and he said this to people, I have a gift. Well, that gift is imploding. Lee?
Pat, we're learning more now about why the jury convicted abortionist Kermit Gosnell of first-degree murder. One of the jurors says most of them felt the case came down to greed. The jury foreman says Gosnell routinely provided abortions, even if that meant killing live babies. He says that was just, quote, business as usual for Gosnell. Another juror says the most difficult part of the trial was looking at the photos of those dead babies and knowing that that kind of evil exists in the world. The Boy Scouts will vote soon on whether to lift the ban on gay scouts. Many churches are anxious to see if the Scouts will give in to pressure by liberal and gay rights groups. As Heather Sells explains, a yes vote would likely force thousands of church-sponsored Boy Scout troops to pull out.
The Scouting Oath inspires youth to honor God, country, and keep morally straight. It's why many boys and their parents get involved, and why many are so upset about the proposed change.
I've heard several boys say, I'm done. And they'll be within a year of getting their Eagle. And getting your Eagle is a very, very difficult thing to do.
At a minimum, a change to allow openly gay boys would complicate Scouting. Parents and leaders we spoke with say they're not sure yet just how they would accommodate these kids and make the program work.
What do you do when he turns 18? Let's say he comes in at 14 years old, goes through everything, he's a wonderful scout, gets an Eagle Project, turns 18, wants to become a leader and say, well, I'm sorry, you're gay, you cannot be a leader.
I would expect that we'd have to have separate sleeping accommodations for heterosexual scouts and separate for homosexual scouts. We'd have to have separate bathing facilities.
The proposed change is perhaps Hugh Travis's biggest headache these days. As a Scout executive, he oversees 35,000 boys and adults in the Middle Tennessee Council. It's one of several councils nationwide that's gone public with its opposition. Nationally, the Boy Scouts of America says the change would be good for Scouting because it, quote, acknowledges changes in society and is reflective of how our major religious chartered organizations operate. Faith groups do sponsor 70% of units nationwide, but many, like the Catholic Church and Southern Baptists, say they will not give up core beliefs to stay with the Scouts. That includes First Baptist in Hendersonville. The potential dilemma is putting families here in a difficult position. Mark Carson is close to becoming an Eagle Scout.
We certainly want to keep them on that path. However, if this goes through, I think the first thing that's going to happen is many churches, especially in the Southern Baptist and many others as well, are going to drop their charters.
Conservative activist John Stemberger says the loss of such church groups would devastate the Boy Scout organization.
I think you'd see a mass exodus, not only of major denominations, but just of common sense parents saying, you know what, we can't trust Scouting anymore. There's not that moral consistency throughout the program.
For many families, it's a painful time, watching the program they value struggle and the sons they love caught in the middle.
I know for my son, he loves Scouts. We get here early. We never miss a meeting. He wants to do it all. And he's asked me, he's like, Mom, what do I do?
Heather Sells, CBN News.
Deadly tornadoes killed at least 6 people in North Texas overnight, and emergency officials warn the death toll is likely to rise as crews search through shattered homes. Granbury was the hardest hit town, with 3 confirmed twisters just southwest of Fort Worth. The storms dropped heavy rain and hail the size of grapefruit in some areas. Dozens of homes were destroyed and hundreds of people injured, but survivors say they are thankful to be alive.
Then all of a sudden things just started swirling, and you could see stuff going all through the air. The tin roofs, stuff started hitting the house.
Luckily, we made it, but there's people missing still.
Operation Blessing will be sending truckloads of supplies and aid to the victims down there, and it will be mobilizing its mobile command center and more from its hub in Dallas. Pat?
You know, ladies and gentlemen, just think that you were in the path of one of those deadly tornadoes, and suddenly it rips down and it tears up the house that you have built and lived in for many years. And all of your possessions are scattered over a several-mile area. And maybe you survived by hiding in a bathtub in some inner bathroom or some other sheltered location, and you're not. Maybe you have a little wound, but you're alive. But everything's gone. No food, no clothes, nothing. And that's the kind of situation that's there. These are good, strong, hard-working people, but they need a hand. And so Operation Blessing is extending a hand to them. We operate a 45,000 square foot facility in Grand Prairie, Texas, that is just about 70 miles from the center of that tornado. So we have a disaster relief fund, and we want to send to them mobile kitchens, and we have, we have wheelbarrows and shovels and rakes and gloves and all kinds of stuff that we can do to help them rebuild. If you want to help, It's a Disaster Relief Fund, CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia. These are your friends, these are your neighbors.
Vermont could be the next state to legalize physician-assisted suicides. The House has approved a bill that would permit doctors to prescribe a lethal dose of medication to terminally ill patients. The bill now heads to the governor, who's a strong supporter of the legislation. If passed, Vermont would join Oregon, Washington State, and Montana to adopt such a measure. Opponents are concerned the law eventually could target the disabled and elderly. Bibles are returning to Georgia state parks and lodges. They were removed after guests expressed concerns, and while the state was investigating the issue. Georgia Governor Nathan Deal ordered the Department of Natural Resources to return the Bibles. In a statement, he said that no laws were being violated because the Bibles were donated by outside groups and not by the state. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com